by developing on a green pathway, or what is described as climate positive growth. The important thing about this is that it will create jobs and wealth and deal with extreme poverty. And I think we should ask ourselves the question, why does the climate positive growth paradigm for development make sense? Why does it make sense for Africa to develop along a green economic paradigm? It is because we have climate competitiveness. That is to say that our economies will do better than most other economies if we go green. And this is so, especially as the world increasingly pays for climate solutions. And what I mean by that is that through consumer preferences, consumers in different parts of the world, of course, are changing their ideas about what they will consume and whether those things are green. There's also a price on carbon. In many, many different economies today, there is a price on carbon. In other words, you're emitting carbon, you pay a price for it one way or the other. Or the rules that enforce a shift to lower emission solutions. For example, Europe's what are called CBAMs, the carbon border adjustment mechanisms. These are taxes on carbon that is in embedded products imported into the EU, for example. So if you're importing certain items into the EU and it is whatever carbon is embedded in those products, you pay some kind of a tax for it. And the way that works is obviously that it not just discourages carbon intensive industries that are producing products, but it also makes sure that you pay a price for it. So the places in the world that can provide green solutions most cost competitively have a massive economic opportunity. So if as in Africa we can produce any product that is competitive, green products that are competitive, we already have a massive economic advantage. And thanks to Africa's abundance of high quality, untapped renewable energy, our young entrepreneurial workforce, and our relevant natural assets and resources, we have the key ingredients to be a major climate action powerhouse. Indeed, being late starters to industrialization and our low carbon footprint can actually be an advantage to us, enabling us to develop greenfield energy manufacturing, saving us the cost of abandoned legacy carbon-intensive manufacturing projects. And by pursuing an industrialization pathway using renewable energy, of which we have 60% of the world's potential, we can actually develop the first green industrial civilization. We can green global manufacturing and supply chains. We can protect our carbon sinks and remove carbon from the air. We can achieve economic growth without growing emissions or even keeping emissions constant. This way, we can actually realize economic growth, job creation, livelihood improvement by being a part of the climate solution. I think it's also been very, very well argued that Africa probably has the best potential in terms of the green and blue assets that we have to become the first truly green industrial civilization and thus enable the world to achieve its net zero objectives. Africa is a global powerhouse of natural and renewable energy resources. And this positions the continent at the heart of the green transition. Now, there are some facts from very well-established published resources that show that Africa holds 1/6 of the world's remaining forests, 1/6 of all of the forests. And forests, of course, are important because they are carbon sinks. That's what absorbs the carbon dioxide from the air. And Africa's forests absorb something in the region of about 1.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually. The Congo Basin rainforest is the planet's largest tropical carbon sink, absorbing more carbon than the Amazon and Southeast Asia combined. The forest of the Amazon, which of course is one of the largest carbon sinks in the world, and Southeast Asia. all combined. Three of Africa's largest marine ecosystems are among the world's top 4 in productivity. For carbon capture, for the carbon capture potential, regions such as the Rift Valley, Zululand and Basin, the Zululand Basin, Rovuma, the Rovuma Basin as well, and Ethiopia's Blue Nile offer prime locations for carbon capture technologies. These are areas, where carbon capture technology will prosper like no other place on the face of the earth. Perhaps one should mention, as an aside, that carbon sinks in the developed economies have been completely depleted over time. The US, for example, has lost over 30% of its forest reserves since about the 1630s. Also, Africa is rich in the minerals which are essential for low carbon technologies. And this includes cobalt, graphite, and manganese. Manganese, of course, is used in battery storage, as well as the platinum group metals, which are key for green hydrogen production. Bauxite and chromite, which are important components in the manufacture of solar panels, and phosphate rock, which is vital for making batteries and fertilizers. As of 2022, Morocco held 2/3 of the world's phosphate rock reserves. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, produces over 2/3 of global cobalt. South Africa is home to 90% of the world's platinum group metals. Guinea holds the world's largest bauxite reserves. Mali has 840,000 tons of lithium reserves. Of course, you know how important lithium is now in new battery technology. Niger is the second largest exporter of uranium ore. Gabon is the second largest producer of manganese in the world. Zambia is the world's top exporter of unrefined copper. Mozambique is the second largest producer of graphite. Zimbabwe is the third largest exporter of chromium ore. For renewable energy potential, Africa has 40% of the world's solar resources. Kenya is probably the world's leader in geothermal capacity, power capacity, especially that's under construction today. The Olkaria plant is one which everyone is looking at as perhaps what will be the standard for geothermal plants in the world. Ethiopia is making good progress with the Hawassa Eco-Industrial Park. Wind power would improve electricity generation 30-fold in Chad, in Mauritania, in Niger, and Mali with full deployment. The Grand Inga Dam in the DRC could generate 40,000 megawatts of electricity, twice the capacity of China's Three Gorges Dam, currently in the world's largest, which is currently the world's largest. So the economic case for renewable technologies for manufacturing is getting stronger and stronger by the day. In other words, that we can actually use renewable energies for manufacturing as opposed to burning fossil fuels. Last year's IEA publication showed that already the total cost per kilowatt hour of grid-scale solar, including storage, is lower than that of gas peaking technology, even without the valuing the fossil fuel price volatility and without putting a price on emissions. In other words, it is getting cheaper now to use solar power for manufacturing as opposed to even gas, which we know is relatively cheap. And that is improving day by day. In other words, it is getting cheaper and cheaper, literally by the day, to use renewable energy for manufacturing purposes. Africa's renewable energy is not only abundant, but also has very low seasonality or intermittency, which of course makes it possible to provide renewable baseload to power continuous industrial production. One of the chief problems, as you know, with using solar energy is seasonality or intermittency. In other words, the sun goes up at a particular point in time and then falls at a particular point in time, or goes down at a particular point in time. But the good thing about Africa is that seasonality is very low. The changes are very, very low. And today with battery technology, it's even easier to store that power. Very recently, Malawi launched one of the biggest of those battery energy storage systems. And many countries in Africa are beginning to take advantage of some of the great progress that has been made in battery energy storage. That means that they can now use more effectively grid-scale solar for purposes of manufacturing. Industrial production and the use of low-carbon fuels, such as hydrogen and ammonia in manufacturing, is also becoming very popular. Of course, as well as the export of some of these products, ammonia and hydrogen. And there are so many opportunities that African countries are opening up already in green hydrogen manufacture, for example. In the past 5 years, we've seen many green hydrogen projects in Africa reaching final investment decision. Namibia has received over $500 million in investment in green hydrogen, and its substantial investments in solar energy and other renewables and clean energy that's required for green hydrogen have made it very attractive, a very attractive place for that type of investment. Angola is set to become the first exporter of green ammonia to Germany, and I'm told that that may actually take place this year. The full capacity of the green hydrogen plant that is planned in Angola is 280 tons annually. There are other countries such as Egypt, Kenya, Morocco, and Mauritania. They also have ongoing green hydrogen production goals. So clearly, with its vast green assets, Africa has the potential to lead the world's first truly sustainable industrial revolution. But I think it might be useful to take, a bit of a closer look at what climate positive growth in manufacturing would look like. For the first time in history, we have the technology to significantly reduce carbon emissions from industrial production on a large scale. Also, for the first time in history, we are building and running climate-friendly industries, and it is becoming more affordable, even more affordable than traditional methods. Now, we must adopt these innovations and expand them quickly if we are to take advantage of the resources that we have. When deciding where to set up production, for example, we need to consider 3 factors: access to key resources like renewable energy, land, and labor. Then, of course, the availability of raw materials, proximity to markets that will buy the products, etc. The global industrial landscape of the future will not necessarily be in the same locations that they are in today. Markets are changing, and they are changing quickly. And so are the resources needed for sustainable production. Africa has a huge opportunity to become a major industrial player, a major sustainable industry player. A good starting point is processing its own raw materials. And we'll just take 2 examples of that. Turning iron ore to steel, for example, and then bauxite into aluminum. By 2050, nearly 40% of new city dwellers worldwide will be in African cities. Of course, that's related to the fact that Africa will become possibly the 3rd largest, will by that time be possibly the 2nd or 3rd largest in terms of population. So African cities will be driving the massive need for construction materials like steel. Yet Africa currently produces less than 1% of the world's steel, even though it exports over 77 million tons of iron ore every year, mostly to Asia and Europe. At the same time, Africa imports nearly 6 million tons of steel from these regions. So if we processed iron ore into steel locally near the mines, it could eliminate 2/3 of transport-related emissions, over 5 million tons of CO2 per year. Additionally, new green steel plants in Africa could use renewable energy to produce hydrogen as fuel, cutting emissions from steel production itself by as much as 95%. And of course, combining local processing and reduced transportation, Africa could actually lower emissions by over 110 million tons of CO2 annually. And we can generate something in the order of about 25 billion US dollars in additional revenue, create about 24,000 direct jobs and another 215 indirect jobs in related industries. The 44 gigawatts of new renewable energy that is needed for this transition, and I'm talking about the transition from simply exporting ore to processing the iron ore into steel. What we require for that is 44 gigawatts of power. And that by itself would attract even more investment. So really it's an anchor demand situation that can be created simply by rather than exporting raw ores, manufacturing or processing those ores. Beyond economic growth, this would also help to reduce Africa's trade deficits. It will stabilize local currencies, create new supply chain opportunities for Europe. And this is not just a theoretical idea, and I'm talking about the green steel process. Sweden has already produced fully green steel, and companies in industries like car manufacturing are already committing to using green steel. So while green steel still faces technical challenges, aluminum production, on the other hand, is an even clearer opportunity because it runs entirely on electricity. So processing Africa's 83 million tons of exported bauxite into aluminum locally using renewable energy would cut global emissions by 335 million tons of CO2 each year. That's nearly 1% of total global emissions. This shift could generate something in the order of about 38 billion in revenue, create over 60,000 direct jobs and 280,000 jobs in related industries, and provide a strong demand for 20 gigawatts of renewable energy. So by embracing these changes, Africa can actually lead the way in sustainable industrial production while boosting its economy and reducing its environmental impact. The other massive green opportunity is in agriculture. Africa holds over 65% of the world's remaining uncultivated arable land, offering immense potential for building food systems and guaranteeing food security. However, industrial agriculture contributes almost 1/3 of global emissions. And some of the research that's available today, that's some research that was carried out just in 2018, shows that Africa's greenhouse gas emissions, mainly stemming from agricultural activities, are among the world's fastest growing emissions globally.